I wanted to do these honors. First, I'd like to bring out a very genuine article. He's I think, one of our great American filmmakers, and that's Jeff Nichols. And then something I've wanted to say for some time, and there are many of us in the film business and outside of the film business and in the public who feel that the year of 2011 will be remembered, what will be remembered the year of 2011 is the finest performance by an actor, is Michael Shannon in this movie. Michael? And now Chaz is coming out to give Michael his thumb.
This is really a special award, an award, as Michael is alluding to, that you should have gotten in 2011. And, but we hope that this somewhat makes up for it. The Golden Thumb.
Thank you.
We want to thank you for that performance, and we want to tell you that this is a special film that was sponsored tonight by the Champaign County Anti-Stigma Alliance.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Peter Tracy and Champaign County Anti-Stigma Alliance.
Sit down? Yeah, sit. Oh, thank you. Okay. The first question that's on everybody's mind. Jeff, will you tell us how we should interpret the end of this movie?
Well, for those of you that saw Shotgun Stories, you know, it was a pretty serious film. And I just really wanted to make something kind of upbeat. So people could walk out of the theater feeling good about life. You know, obviously, I've been asked that question a million times, and I promise it's not a cop-out. I wrote it purposefully to be somewhat ambiguous, and I'd like it to remain that way. Now, that being said, for me, because you can't talk about an ending without talking about the whole movie, hopefully, and for me, this film, at its heart, is really about marriage and commitment and communication. And for the ending to work for me, the only part that really concerned me about getting right was the two of these people looking at one another at the end of this film. I wanted to make sure that they were on the same page. I felt like if these two characters could go through all of this, and at the end of this film, without any, talking, look at one another and see the same thing, then I thought that was an appropriate place to end the film. Beyond that, I leave it open to discussion.
You said when you introduced the film that this was a film about a moment in your life and about a moment in the country's life, something like that. What did you mean by that?
When I wrote this, I was in my first year of marriage. I'd only been married a few months when I started writing it, and I was thinking a lot at the time about what it means to be married and commitment and the institution of marriage and why some marriages work and why a lot don't. And that was a thing I was dealing with totally separate from this film. I was just writing a movie about some guy in a storm shelter. And it started to bleed into this, this other thing I was working on. At the same time, though, I was moving from my 20s into my 30s, and I was really taking a step forward in terms of, growing up and being an adult with Shotgun Stories. My career had started to, advance in a positive way, and I was getting married. We were talking about kids, and the world at large, though my life was starting to come together, seemed to be unraveling a little bit. Gas prices are spiking, and we're in wars, and Deepwater Horizon is spewing oil into the Gulf, and I felt like we were really on the verge of economic collapse. And so that was the summer of 2008, and all these things were weighing on me, in addition to just trying to take care of a family and that thought and that notion and the pressure that comes from that. And so obviously the word anxiety was in my mind a lot, and when I write, I try to pick a theme or an idea to hold on to. With Shotgun Stories, it was revenge, and with this, it was anxiety. So what I meant was that it directly reflected this period in my life, and I feel like it directly reflected where everybody was, and I don't even know as Americans. Iceland went bankrupt, so I think the world at large was kind of feeling it. That's what I thought of.
I remember when we read the screenplay of this movie that my partner, Tom Bernard, was so taken with feeling that this movie was so well researched with regard to schizophrenia. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it has come up a lot when people see the movie. They say, oh, this is what schizophrenia, clinical schizophrenia is really all about. And did you do any research in that regard, or did you, Michael?
Well, I had perused the DSM before when I was working on Bug, so I was familiar with that book. But I didn't do a whole lot of research into it because. Honestly, I feel like Curtis at the beginning of the movie is a fairly everyday Joe, and he doesn't really know much about it. I think despite even what happened with his mother, he never really looked into it. He didn't want to think about it, and he just, at the beginning of the movie, is ostensibly a pretty ordinary fellow working a pretty ordinary job, and then something starts happening to him, and he doesn't know what to do about it. So I never really wanted to know more than he did, because I felt like then I'd run the risk of looking down on him or something.
Similarly, I did some basic research so I could get some symptoms, because I wanted it to be realistic. And I actually got a book very similar to the book that he gets in the film, and it actually had a quiz in the back. And I took it, and I filled in his symptoms, and he didn't score very high. And I thought, well, that's interesting. That needs to go in the film. So there was some basic research just to make sure things weren't totally far-fetched. I remember speaking to a friend who is a counselor, and she actually corrected one thing that I didn't change, which, was the fact about the mother being found, digging through a dumpster in northern Kentucky. She was like, that's not really what they'd be doing. They would be in the aisles of the grocery store talking to the mayonnaise or something. And that didn't work as well. So I didn't change that. Oddly enough, I did as much research into cochlear ear implants and deafness as I did schizophrenia.
Well, tell us about that choice of that character being deaf.
As a writer, it started as a fairly uninteresting choice in that it was literally a device in order to apply more pressure to the character. I knew I wanted to talk about health insurance, and I knew I wanted to put the stress of this job on him and the loss of the job and the loss of the health insurance. I'm still very confused as to why health insurance is tied to employment in this country. And so, having an ailing or a sick daughter or a daughter that needed, in this case, this implant, I knew that down the road I could use that as leverage, which is a really kind of gross, disgusting way to think about it, but that's what we have to do as writers. But as the story started to develop and this idea of marriage and communication started to come into it, it added this other level, or other layer, in that. And this really isn't clear. We had to edit a few things out of the movie because it couldn't be any longer. And there was a subplot about the daughter getting meningitis when she was a few years younger. And so she actually wasn't born deaf. So this deafness is kind of a newfound thing in their family. And it's alluded to. I don't know how many people pick up on it. But, this thought that this character is having to figure out how to communicate with his daughter while this couple is also dealing with, this shortfall in communication. It just all started to work and seem appropriate,
Did you write the screenplay with Michael in mind for the role?
I did not, actually, which makes me seem foolish. But, with Shotgun Stories, I wrote that part for Mike specifically, even though I didn't know him at the time. And with this, I sat down and this was really personal, and I really thought about myself a lot when I was writing it. And I'm sorry, Mike, but when I close my eyes and imagine myself, I don't picture you.
Well, we have similar asses.
That's true.
So how did you come to choose
Very
him?
close. When it was, that's it, you shouldn't say anything else. When it came time to cast, I was looking around and thinking about it, and I just thought, okay, well, who's the greatest actor in the world? And I happen to have their cell phone number.
Daniel Day-Lewis?
Daniel Day-Lewis, and I called him, and he was busy.
He was making shoes.
And, Mike and I were friends. I gave him the script when I finished it, as a friend, and he read it and I think liked it. So it was pretty easy. That was a pretty easy choice,
Did you have a lot of rehearsal, Michael?
No. We started shooting it right after I finished the first season of Boardwalk Empire. So I finished that on like a Friday, and we started shooting this on a Monday.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, it was fast. I was panicking over the weekend because I was worried I didn't have enough time to put my script in a binder. I was really excited that I managed to get it by Monday. It was actually in a binder.
You've told that joke before, and I've never even seen you carry a script, much less in a binder.
Well, once I get it in a binder, then
Then it goes into a dark place. You don't have to look at it. That makes sense. That makes sense.
But no, we didn't. But we didn't. We tried on Shotgun Stories to rehearse, but that didn't really
That didn't work.
work. Yeah. I mean,
No,
it'd be one thing if the characters ever said anything. It's hard to rehearse just walking around.
That's true. Mike and I, because on Shotgun Stories, for better or worse, we developed this principle of not rehearsing, and so we just kind of dive into it. And the other actors kind of had to play catch up. I remember Lisa Gay Hamilton, who plays the counselor, bless her heart, she flew in one day, like that morning, and then we had the camera set up, and she sat down in front of Mike, and I was like, all right, are you ready? And she was like, oh, you're shooting? I said, yeah, we're shooting. I only usually do about 3 or 4 takes, so. And we were shooting 2 cameras on her that day, so we did about three takes of her, and that was it. It's like, thanks for coming. She's great, though. I mean, that's the good thing. I have to say about this cast, in addition to Mike, and of course Jessica, but beyond that, we had Shea Wiggum, we had Ray McKinnon, we had Lisa Gay Hamilton, we had Kathy Baker, Katie Mixon. Like, I got all of these people that I love their work, and they all just showed up. It was pretty remarkable.
Well, and seriously, on a serious note, like, it doesn't mean to make it sound like it was haphazard or something. It's just something that, for me personally, when I read it, I just kind of understood it. I felt like I was in a similar, I was having a similar experience to what Jeff was having, in terms of being kind of overwhelmed by responsibility and commitment, and feeling like, because I had just had a child, and that was, I had never experienced anxiety before, anything close to that, and I've also always been pretty frightened by what's going on in the world, and recently even more so. So that it just made the thing always just made sense to me. There was never a scene where I was like, oh, this scene doesn't make any sense. I don't know why. It just always seemed to make sense.
There's that incredible scene in the movie, the Lions Club scene, where you turn that table over. It's just awesome. How many times did you have to shoot that, and how difficult was that to prepare for?
That was actually the easier scene we shot that day. We shot 2 scenes that day, and one of them, Jeff, it was so bad, Jeff had to turn it into a montage. He took all the dialogue out of it, with all the guys sitting at the bar after we get rained out from work.
2 shots of that now.
Yeah. But yeah, no, the Lions Club scene, it was a weird day, because we had 2 scenes in the Lions Club, one being me and the guys farting around at the bar, and the other one being me, losing my shit. So it was like a very strange day. We spent most of the morning doing that bar scene, and we had lunch and came back. And we didn't do it that many times. We did it once, and then I said to Jeff, maybe I should do it something different.
Yeah.
You want to say that? I would feel awkward talking
Yeah,
about
of
that.
course. It's pretty miraculous, actually. There are 2 different versions of that scene that existed in the edit room. I think this speaks to Mike. Both are powerful, but they're totally different. There's one that he did that was totally subdued and still terrifying, but...
Did he do that one first?
No. No. It started loud, and then he brought it down, and then we brought it back up a little bit. I think we did 6 takes of it. And as I remember it, we had all of those extras. Those were just people that came to eat fried fish. And nobody knew what was going on. So we shot the first part of the scene, which is, the punching and the kicking And that is always boring for people because it's all these, you shoot these little shots. And then it came time for the second half of the scene, and I had 2 cameras that day, and I put one on Hannah, the daughter, because she didn't know what was going on. And then we had a wide shot, and Mike flipped that table over, and that room just went silent, and he exploded. And at the end, it gets very quiet, and then they walk out of the room. It takes forever. And I yelled cut, and the whole room just started applauding. It was like dinner theater for them. And this is he's really good. He was in Pearl Harbor. So then we had to reset it and knock all the coleslaw off of people, and each take, though, I would move the camera. So I would use one camera was always on Mike, whether that was a wide shot or the close-up on a long lens. And my focus puller, he had basic marks on the floor, and this guy's just pulling on the fly. It's something maybe people don't think about very often, but it's very easy for things to be out of focus. And the fact that he kept Mike in focus is a miracle. Dave Reagan, and we had no idea, where he was going or what was going to happen. We just knew in this area things would happen. And then I took another camera and I would put it either on Jessica, or on one of the friends, or just people in the crowd. And we did it about 6 times, and that was enough. And actually, what you see, to be totally honest, what you see in the film is an amalgam of the quiet and the loud. It obviously starts loud, and I used the tail end when he says, "Sleep well in your beds, because if this thing comes true, there ain't gonna be no more." That's actually from the quiet take. So,
Can you tell us something about the special effects? Because it's so rare there are special effects like that in a low-budget movie.
right.
And how did you do those?
Well, when I wrote this, I'd written shotgun stories to be made, specifically, like for no money. And I kind of took the gloves off a little bit on this one. And, obviously, I had storms and rain and birds and floating furniture and, truck wrecks, things that you don't typically put in a low-budget film.
I made that furniture float with my mind.
Which saved us. And so going into it, I knew how to make 80% of this film, which isn't that expensive. But there was this other component that I didn't know, and luckily at the time, my agent also represented these guys called the Strauss Brothers, who own this multi-million-dollar effects company, and he gave them shotgun stories in the script. And these guys make, Roland Emmerich films and big budget, like Wolverine and stuff. And they called me and they were like, "We really like this. Everybody talks so real." And which I was flattered by. And they said, "We're in," And we didn't talk money. And they just said, "We're in." All right. And then we ended up paying them $100,000. To do probably what is $2 to $4 million worth of effects work. Easily. And I had, easily, right? And I had just full access to them. They were amazing, and I wasn't easy on them, because I said, "Look, guys, this is an independent film for whatever that means and whatever that's worth, and your stuff can't stick out. It has to fit with the rest of this stuff, or this is going to be really bad." And so we went through so many algorithms for those birds, and the storm cells went through so many iterations. Every time I would call with a note, I would just expect them to be like, "Do you know how much you're paying us?" And just like hang up the phone. But they didn't. They were amazing, and I think they're really proud of the film, which was even better. They came to Sundance with us, and it was. oddly enough, I don't think their films usually get that much critical praise. And so they were pleased with that.
The other thing I just wanted to ask you about, we were talking about this earlier today. After every screening of this film, people, they all want to talk about the weather.
It's apparently raining outside right now.
Oh, okay.
I'm not kidding. Sorry.
But it's very key to the film, the weather. So it was your intention all along to kind of unnerve the public about the potential of the danger of weather?
Well, you know, I think a summer. There's nothing prettier than a summer storm, and it rolling in is, you know, a summer storm rolling in is just exciting, and there's energy, and there's a little bit of danger, and it's so I always that just seemed visually like something I'd really like to explore. But also, if you're going to pick a villain for this film, you know, it's going to be nature. And I thought that was a really great villain because it has no point of view, it has no objective, it just is, and that's really scary. My dad, who I love very, very much, he always has kind of pushed me to try and, like with Shotgun Stories, he's like, we could make this, or you could make like a comedy, and we might actually make some money. And on this one, he was like, you could, I'm not telling you to, but you could always say that there's like a chemical plant that's like upriver. And like this, you know, you could have the shot of like the barrel that's spilled into the water. I'm like, that's a really terrible idea, Dad. And, but and this is why I love him, because he'll bring things up like that, and I can push against them and say, that's terrible. And he keeps coming back, which is great. But it made me think for the first time. I was like, oh, well, I'm making a conscious decision not to have an exact cause of all this. And isn't that interesting? And then you start to think about nature as your antagonist, and then you have confidence in the story you're rolling out to people, and you know where to put your emphasis.
I just can't tell you how many times I've heard from someone when they read in the paper or they see on the news about these tornadoes, they think about this movie. And I guess you bring out the terror that must be coming.
Well, you know, I grew up in Arkansas. It's probably this way in Illinois. But we grew up with tornado sirens on our light poles. And every Wednesday at noon, if it was clear, they would test them. And they're basically air raid sirens. And so growing up, every Wednesday it would be this little reminder that at any time something could fall out of the sky and just sweep you off the planet. And I didn't worry about it that much, but it was there, you know.
Let's open up for some questions. Apparently there are people that have microphones in the aisles.
Right here, directly in front of you. Okay.
I had 3 very quick questions. One, how long did it take to shoot? How long did it take to edit? And was it digital or film?
It's film. I've been very fortunate to be able to shoot on film. I just finished my 3rd film that we also shot on film. And that's just kind of that's my thing, which is scary because I hear Kodak's stopping making motion picture film next year. Don't know what to do about that.
Also, I was told that this is the only film shown here in 35 millimeter.
Actually, on a film print. I don't know, maybe. That guy works for Kodak. But we shot on film, and we shot in 2:3:5. It's the wide screen aspect ratio, super wide screen. I don't know how you say it. I usually call it anamorphic, though this wasn't anamorphic. My first film was.
CinemaScope.
It's CinemaScope 2:3:5. This is actually shot super 35, and I won't get too technical, but it's actually shot on a 35 millimeter negative, and then you frame it. Basically, you put black bars at the top and bottom, and they blow it up, which I don't like. I like anamorphic more, and I went back to anamorphic for my last film. but it worked for this, and there was a reason for doing it, which is when you shoot anamorphic, talking about focus, it is, I mean, you have this much margin of error. And I knew we would be moving so fast. Your next question, we shot this in 24 days, 4 6-day weeks, very quickly. And I knew we wouldn't have the budget time or ability to go back and shoot anything if it was out of focus. And the anamorphic scared me. So we shot standard 35 and then essentially Super 35 and framed it for Super 35. And your second question in the middle.
How long did you edit?
Oh, how long did we edit? That was fairly quick. My son was born August 5th of 2010, and we were screening at Sundance that January. And we had finished shooting mid-July of 2010. And so, yeah, it took me, we had picture lock by Christmas.
We have a question up on the balcony and to your left.
To do an independent film takes investors. Has this film paid its investors back? And for all of you up there, what portion or percentage of independent films pay their investors back the monies they've invested in them?
Sounds like you have a stake in this question, sir.
You've got to do this comedy.
I am very proud to say that this film has paid its investors back, thanks in part to Michael and France. I'm huge in France. So, yes, this one did. Shotgun Stories, I'm pleased to say, anyone that wasn't a blood relative got their money back. And we're currently suing the foreign sales company because they haven't paid us, so my blood relatives would even get some money back if they hadn't stolen it from me. As far as percentages, I don't have that data, but I wouldn't bet on it. If you like your money, don't put it into a film.
Speaking of France, Jeff's next film, Mud, is going to be in competition at the Cannes Film Festival, so everyone's excited about that. He got the jitters tonight of the screening of this film. Imagine what he's going to be like in Cannes.
Yeah, Mike's in it. Mike has a smaller role, but you're the comic relief. Literally.
Well, no, I got to do all that diving.
We're not supposed to talk about it.
Oh, sorry.
Other questions?
Ever so slightly to your right and in the aisle, right here.
So first, just in the interest of fairness, I think, could you guys both stand up and turn around so we can just compare asses with that? So that I feel like there's some ladies
Actually,
here that might.
we made this a while ago, and it may not be true anymore.
And
I've been kind of taking it easy lately.
You've been training for Superman.
Oh,
It's
no,
different.
that was a while ago.
Oh.
But I guess on a more serious note, and for both of you, the thing that strikes me, and this is the third time that I've seen the film, and the thing that really struck me this time is how much, Michael, for your character, how much of actually like a horror film this is, in the sense of how you are trapped by yourself. And I just was curious how, if you were sort of conscious of the conventions of horror filmmaking on any level when you were thinking about the execution of this. In many ways, it reminds me of David Cronenberg's The Fly, in the sense that you're a prisoner of yourself.
I gave you some horror advice once.
It was very good advice.
The horror convention was the dream where I'm worried Samantha, she's at the stove and it looks like she's gonna give me a hard time too. And so like she's standing there with her back to the stove and then it pans over to the living room and it comes back to her. And Jeff had it, it's like, okay, so when the camera pans back to you, I want you to turn around and look at like, no, dude, you're doing this all wrong. When the camera pans back to Jessica, she's already turned around. That's more frightening. And I was right.
Okay, next.
We thought about horror. I thought about horror a lot. But, you know, I thought about The Shining a lot. There are a few films that I ripped off for this movie. 3, in fact. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, The Shining, and a great film called Safe by Todd Haynes, if you haven't seen it.
Also a Sony Classics movie.
There you go.
Yes, in the back.
I may not have been looking at it correctly, but I was wondering how you were going to end it. And I wonder if you had different ideas about ending, because one thing that struck me was when he opened the shelter door and you just saw the sky, if that was something you considered as an ending.
My dad mentioned it as an ending. And, you know, watching it tonight, I actually thought, I was like, yep, he was right. That would really be a nice place to end this film. But I was going for something different. And this, because if you end it there, it's really hopeful. Well, it's true, you know. He steps up to the plate, he opens the door. This is what it means to stay with us. He gets the door open.
It's also a lot less complicated. It's just like,
it is.
he thought something bad was happening, but it didn't happen at the end. I mean, it's like...
You know, correct. Which is probably why we didn't do it. But you know, I had that ending from the very beginning. I had that ending before I had the middle. And a few small details changed. Right before we started production, I tweaked it just a little bit. In the original version, the rain never hit her hand. And I added that, for better or worse. But I said, you know, making it, this is, you know, this is a choice. This is either going, you know, to make the movie for people or ruin it for them. And I think it's done just that, you know. And you know, but damn it, we're making independent films here, you know. When will I get to do this again? You know, already this new movie, I've tested it, you know. People won't like that shit. And you know, it's like, come on, let's take a shot at something unique. And beyond that, I really thought that was the appropriate way to close out this relationship with these people. So, yeah.
You know, what's really fascinating about this film is how it's so suspenseful, and the way Jeff does it is unique from other filmmakers. He does not feel rushed. He takes his time, and there's a confidence to that kind of patience that also keeps us on our toes. And I think that's one of the most remarkable things about the film.
Well, I also think, I mean, in terms of, it's easy to forget because there's looking up at the sky and then there's the scene at the beach, but there's a really, really super important scene between those two scenes, because it's not just about whether there's a storm or not, it's the playing out, like Jeff said earlier, of this relationship and this contract between these two people. And she very specifically says, I need you to go to a real doctor and really get this looked at, you know. And so that scene is also very important. I think it's important to see not just, you know, whether there's a storm or not a storm, but like Jeff said, it's more about the relationship between the two of them, because then you'd be ending the movie with him alone, looking at the sky, as opposed to the last shot that we have, which is all us all together.
Family. Well, and I know I made that crack about being hopeful, earlier, but I actually think there's hope in the current ending. When he looks at the, that psychiatrist and says, "You mean I have to leave my family?" Like, that just breaks my heart. I mean, it's just terrible. You've been through all this stuff. You open the door, and now this is how reality is. This is how you have to deal with that. You locked your family in a storm shelter, and you're going to have to go see somebody about that. And that, to me, is crushing. And then you're given this additional moment where maybe that doesn't have to happen.
Well, the very last shot of the film, believe it or not, I'm starting to buy into this hopeful thing he's talking about. You really feel they're together, and they're taking on the troubles of the world together as a family. And that's a plus. They're not. He's not separate from them anymore.
Absolutely, 100%. That's it. We shouldn't talk about it anymore.
A question from the balcony, almost directly ahead of you.
This is for Michael. I just, first of all, want to comment that I first saw you in Bug and was just absolutely blown away. And again in this, and how, just wanted to ask, how do you get to that place to be just so unraveling and so uncertain of your own mind, but to do it so intensely but so believably at the same time?
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it is subconscious. I mean, because when I'm doing a scene or something, I'm just trying to figure out what the person's trying to accomplish, and I didn't, particularly in this film, didn't set out to try and prove to anyone that I was good at coming undone or anything. I just wanted to tell the story, tell the story. I mean, maybe it's something I just have an intuitive understanding of or empathy for. I mean, this is going to sound really weird, but when I was in my teens, I lived in a neighborhood called Evanston, just north of Chicago. Yeah, it's a great place. It also has a lot of halfway homes, and particularly when I was living there were a lot of insane people wandering around during the day. Literally, I mean, people that I knew a guy that used to take the leaves off the trees and crumble them up and sniff them because he knew that he needed the chlorophyll. That's how. But he would talk to you about it very casually, and I would sit. There's a lot of coffee houses up there, and I just sit at a table drinking coffee, and inevitably someone from one of the local halfway houses would come sit down next to me and ask me if I'd buy him a cup of coffee, and I would, and we'd sit and talk about things sniffing leaves up your nose, and so I guess I have to give Evanston some of the credit.
And this refers a little bit to what you were talking about in regards to pace, but also Mike's amazing because you can put a camera on him and you can just watch him, not saying anything, unrehearsed silence, and things are happening. And a real benefit with Mike, which I think is fascinating, is that you never know where he's going. And I think it benefits this movie greatly that, you get to wonder where we're going to take you, and I think a lot of that's because of Mike. A lesser actor maybe wouldn't take us as far.
Thanks, Jeff.
To your left, please.
Hi, congratulations on a great film. I may have missed it because I was drinking wine the first time I saw it, but where was it filmed?
In
And a
Ohio.
two-part question. Is there a part two?
Is there a sequel? There's a. It's actually not an absurd question. There's a television series that's going to be coming out on. No, there's not. I'm kidding. I did have a conversation with my dad though about having it where, because originally it was written for Arkansas, and I was going to have them not in Myrtle Beach. I was going to have them in Gulf Shores, Alabama, and yes, the sequel was going to be them making their way back up the Mississippi River to the storm shelter, and then when they got there, Dewart was going to be living in it.
Roger, I think next time
Out of
Jeff
your
comes,
mind.
you have to bring his dad.
We shot it in Ohio.
Shot in Ohio.
Grafton,
In Grafton, Ohio.
Although the library's in Elyria.
It's true. That's a little
But
factoid.
yeah, Grafton, Elyria.
In Ohio,
Oberlin,
one of the
gas
producers,
mask scene was in Oberlin.
the gas
the
mask scene was in
historic
Oberlin.
College.
Yes, there was that all kind of south west of Cleveland. There was a tax incentive there. One of the producers was from there, and he lured me away from Arkansas by saying they would make the movie. So.
And you also gave him a cameo in the movie.
I did. Lucky him. He's one of the family members at the dinner table. So.
Yes, slightly in the back, to your right.
Oh, hey, I have a question for each of you, actually. First, Jeff, you mentioned that your dad had this idea with the sort of chemical plant thing, and then I noticed there was that scene where there is, they're watching TV and there's the chlorine cloud. I was wondering if that was already in, or if you kind of went, okay, Dad, I'll throw this in.
Actually, that was based on a real-life incident that happened outside of San Antonio that I heard about. And a train with a chlorine tank on it derailed, and it derailed right in this spot where this man's property, which was surrounded by a quarry, the only way on and off his property were over the train tracks. And his mother died, his sister-in-law died, and I believe his brother died. His wife actually made it. I changed it for the movie. But, and there was this extremely harrowing story of them surviving this chlorine spill. And I heard about it and was fascinated by it. The story's great's not the right word. It's incredible because chlorine is heavier than oxygen, so it hangs close to the ground. And this man told this story about walking outside and seeing all the vegetation around him just turning brown. It was just right in front of his eyes. It was killing everything. And, yeah, I thought, well, that was scary. And I needed...
That's why they invented stilts for those chlorine spills. Get out of those situations.
So anyway, also I needed more than the storm. I wanted there to be something beyond just the rain itself, and I really just wanted them to put on gas masks because I thought that would be bizarre looking and really scary, and so it was one more piece in the puzzle to kind of confine these people, or in his mind, the potential of this storm. Unfortunately, the hardest thing I did in the edit room was take out one scene, which is a scene where he visits the counselor again, Lisa Gay Hamilton, Kendra. It's a great scene, and Mike is amazing in it. And the character actually goes into that, talking about that chlorine spill, and it gets into a conversation about God, and it's a really great scene. But I took it out of the film because, much like with shotgun stories, there's an ongoing discussion about how Mike's character got shot in the back, and at one point, an explanation for that was in the script, and I took it out. And all of a sudden, it made the question far more interesting. And I felt like in this film, there was a scene 3/4 of the way through, at a point in the pacing where we did actually really need to get the show on the road. And we paused for this very long dialogue scene. And Curtis's character explains a lot about what's going on in his belief system, which is fascinating to watch. It was fascinating to write and fascinating to watch Mike do it. And you can find it on the DVD. But I felt like all of the things that he talks about and explains in that scene are better left in you all's minds. Because when I took the scene out and I showed it to a few people, they started to talk about the things that he talked about in that scene, and they were giving those answers rather than him. And I felt like that was valuable for multiple reasons. But it was a tough one to cut. But it kind of tied back in that chlorine thing.
A question from the balcony and up on your left here.
My question is for Michael. The list of films you've been in is pretty long and varied. So my question is, how does the acting experience differ from being in something like this or Bug and something bigger like Pearl Harbor or Kangaroo Jack?
Well, Kangaroo Jack gets its own special. I mean, I like Jeff, but that's
cinema.
Yeah. Well, I just got to go to Australia, which was cool. No, I don't know. Every film is totally different. I mean, even like there was a huge difference between Shotgun Stories and Take Shelter. Even when you work with the same person on multiple occasions, it's very different. Commonly people are like, what's the difference between like a big budget and a small budget? And you'd be surprised how similar they are. No matter how much money the film has, there never seems to be enough money. And no matter how much time they have, there's never enough time. And there's always a lot of like desperation and people do a tremendous amount of preparation, and they show up, and then still the thing can be so elusive, and so fragile and delicate, no matter how ready you think you are to go to work. So I guess it's what Malick says about it, right? What is he doing? Hunting quail, hunting pheasants. It's like it's an accident anytime you're able to, or it's something that just spontaneous that no matter how many resources you have, it's really hard to get your hands on it.
Directly in front of you, towards the rear of the house.
I felt that the most important part of the closing scene of the film was that it was Hannah that first sees the approaching storm.
Yeah, that's really, I noticed that when she makes the gesture. That's a very powerful moment. Yeah.
Set up from the beginning. Thank you.
Yes, just in front of you.
Hi there, quick question, and I swear I'm not trying to turn your movie into an episode of Lost, but given how the first scene rhymes with the last with the oil rain, and given that we never see Curtis wake up, is the first scene not a dream?
No, the first scene's a dream. I can't lie.
Okay, we're directly in front of you.
I noticed in the credits a Ben Nichols associated with the music. Is that your dad or somebody
No,
else?
that's my brother.
Oh.
He actually, Ben actually, and his band Lucero, they're based out of Memphis, they did all the score for my first film, Shotgun Stories, but they didn't do music in this except for the song that you hear over the end credits. Because I had one of his songs over the end credits of Shotgun Stories, so it felt appropriate to have one over this. But actually, a composer named David Wingo did this score, who is, he's a great guy and a great composer. And he did a lot with very little.
Yes, just in front of you. Hi, my question's related to that, actually. Michael's character said that it's a feeling that he was going through, and I think that's best conveyed by the music. And so where does that come in the movie-making process? Like, did you have the music in your mind before you shot the scene, and how does that all work out?
I always have music that I don't write to music. It's really dangerous to write to music because you can put on a really beautiful song and write a scene and think it's great, and then you go back and read it without the music on, and you're like, that's not as great as I had thought. But whenever I'm conceiving of a film, I'm always listening to music. It's the main source of inspiration for me. And I have, I create like a playlist in iTunes, and it's named for each film, and you can go and listen to each film with just temp music, basically. And I present that to my composer before I start shooting, if the composer's around. And I've never had music before I've started filming, specific music. But I've had a very strong sense of the tone that we're going to try for out of music. And then it's Wingo's job to take that and turn it into something original and that works as a cohesive piece. I'm a really big fan of themes. Like in High Noon, there's a theme. And I like that concept. In Shotgun Stories especially, we just play this one piece of music over and over again. But the same goes here. And he just nailed it. The best feeling was he just came in with the final scene when they're unlocking the storm shelter. He just came in with this piece of music that he had written for it, and he was like, before I'd had a chance to play him my temp stuff, which wasn't that great. And he came in and was like, what about this? And it stayed in the whole time. And it was so great because it was like a gift that just was laid, in my lap, because it just tied together that whole ending for me. But music's tricky. It's a tricky thing because score, it can work for you and it can work against you. In Shotgun Stories, there wasn't very much score, which I really like, actually. Because sometimes too much score leads the audience too much. It's like telegraphing a pass in basketball. They know where you're going before you get there, and that's a bad place to be. And sometimes it's just cheesy. And that being said, the right piece of score at the right moment can really help get you over the hurdle. For the end of the film, I mean, that was a big choice for me because I wasn't used to underscoring emotion like that. But I thought that without any music, that end scene was so dark, and you don't know where you're going. And even with music, you don't really know where it's going, but you know that it's a sensitive moment. And so it was a really conscious choice to underscore that scene with music. Whereas other places I like to delete music. That's my philosophy on score.
Towards the rear of the house, slightly to your left.
I was wondering, can I ask two questions? I was wondering if you thought about having him like a link between himself and the weather, like in the Tempest with John Cassavetes, where he starts thinking he's controlling the weather. And why were you guys so mean to the dog?
Mike hated that dog. it had crossed my mind, but I wasn't making fire starters, so, you know. But it had crossed my mind. It crossed my mind, you know, way early on, just like, well, you could go that route, but that seemed a notch too sci-fi for me, for this one. Maybe not my next one, but for this one. And, you know, I think he loves the dog. I think he really, really loves the dog. I think it breaks his heart to have to put his dog in the backyard. And I think it's really sad that he has to give it to his brother. But, you know, I mean, the whole idea, he likes Dewart too. You know, the whole idea is that things close to him, when they attack him in these dreams, he has to distance himself from them. You know, that's set up from that very moment. So that when he flinches when his wife touches his hand, I wanted people to be afraid that he would then have to distance himself from her. And I wanted her to be afraid of that. So yeah, the dog was, that's why we used that dog. Kenny, wasn't it Kenny?
Yeah.
Kenny. He was trained in Schützen, which is a sport where they train dogs to attack your arm. It's very appropriate.
To your far right in the back of the theater.
I thought the chemistry between Michael and Jessica was so amazing, and that you were able to convey the depth of that relationship with so little dialogue. And I wondered if you tested any other actresses.
No. No, I was actually saying it backstage. We're just so lucky to have Jessica involved. Because, you know, there was so much focus put on, you know, getting Mike and having Mike in the role, and I didn't have a list of actresses. And luckily my executive producer, Sarah Green, was the producer on Tree of Life. She was like, which hadn't come out yet. She was like, you should look at this Jessica Chastain. I didn't know who she was. And I flew out to LA and met her, and she was lovely. I still didn't know who she was, but I liked her. And I got to meet very, very, very briefly with Malik. And he told me about her and spoke so highly of her. It's like, well, have to cast her. Didn't think about it too much. And it wasn't until we were on set. And this is one of the issues with independent filmmaking. That psychiatrist scene at the end, we shot that on the first day. Wow. Stupid. And I remember I was sitting there with my DP watching her, and I was just like, wow, she's really, really good. And I just remember thinking, okay, this is gonna be great. And then it just kind of kept getting better, you know, you guys. It just kept getting better.
She asked you a lot of questions, though.
Not as many as Shay.
Shay had a lot of questions.
Yeah, you know, Mike and I don't talk. And Jessica, you know, yeah, she wanted to figure some things out. I remember.
I love this story. What is that story?
So, after Mike urinates himself, there's this argument between the two of them. It's actually funny. I mean, I designed that argument totally after an argument my wife and I would have, to the point to where she hadn't seen any of the film, and I showed it to her one night. We're sitting on the couch, and in the middle of that scene, she just looked over at me and just stared at me. She's like, okay, see, you're paying attention. But my wife, she has this thing that she's like, what's that? Like, what's that look on your face? Like, what's that? And it's so natural to me to hear that, you know? Like, what's that? What are you doing? What's that? And I wrote that in the script, and Jessica was like, that doesn't make any sense. What's that? And I'd say it like 100 times. I don't give line readings. I try desperately not to give line. I was like, what's that? So I have it, just say that. Can't say that. Not going to say that. Doesn't make any sense, Jeff. What do you want to say, Jessica? What is that? What's the difference? Just say, what's that? And we went into 11 takes on that. And in the movie, it's, what is that? Bugs the shit out of me. And yeah, we would have debates throughout the course of the film, Jessica and I. And sometimes I would win and sometimes she would win. And sometimes I was right and sometimes she was right. But, you know, I enjoy that process because, you know, the same way as I enjoy not talking to Mike. Every actor's different. You know, I think of them, they're like these supercomputers. And they're processing all of this information, and I'm just there to, you know, feed them data when they need it and see what comes out. They're all different, and different ones need different things from you. And Shea Wiggum, for instance, really wanted to talk about his character, Dewart. We talked a lot about Dewart. We had pizza several times and talked about Dewart. And that's what he needed, and I'm fine with that, you know. In fact, I tell actors starting off, I say, well, I can talk as much or as little as you would like, and then I just let them kind of decide. So, but yes, Jessica's great.
At the back of the house, directly in front of you, please.
Thank you. Hi. First of all, thank you for bringing one of what was probably the most emotionally intense movie I've ever seen on a big screen to the festival.
Wow.
And a quick comment / question. Obviously, we had the elements of the storms, but really a lot of what the movie was about was the emotional breakdown, for a very good reason, of the marital bond between the two central characters. And then really, for me at least, the end didn't so much matter about whether the storm was real or not real, but when the wife turns to the husband and says, okay, and you have the absolute restoration of that bond. And that reminded me of another movie that has a lot of horror suspense elements like this one, which was the movie Signs that came out about 10 years ago. And I think Roger may have written about this at some point, where many elements of that movie are about the central character, a preacher having lost his faith, and then the restoration of faith, you know, through the flashbacks that he has and how that works into the final scene of that movie, or the final scenes of that movie. And I know you mentioned several pictures that had influenced this one. Was there any thoughts looking back on Signs? Are you familiar with that, and did that influence this at all?
I am familiar with that film, but no, it didn't have a direct impact on this. It didn't. You know, when I think about Curtis's character, I don't know if I ever even told you. You know, the only mistake he makes, in my opinion, at the beginning of the film is that he doesn't share what's happening with his wife. You know, because he's scared of what the real implications might be. But that's where, for the first half of the film at least, that's where a lot of the tension comes from. It's just that he's just not communicating with his wife, you know. So that was a really, that was on purpose. And thank you for picking up on it.
Yes, panel, for your last question, the gentleman down front here.
So we get a fair number of tornadoes around here, and we have an alarm system that goes off Tuesdays at 10 o'clock. Sometimes on days when there actually are tornadoes, sometimes not. In the 50s, there was quite a fad to have shelters, okay, and that was going to protect us from the Russian horde coming in, or you go under your desk, one of the two. Right. And you went to a lot of trouble to create this great condo shelter there, and the actual danger took place about 1,000 miles away. Are you telling us something about creating false securities?
I don't know, maybe following the herd. You know, it wasn't until he listened to everybody to get away from the storm shelter that, you know, something happened. But I don't know. I didn't really look at it that way. Can I tell one story that has really very little to do with your comment? So this is one of the coolest things about, I'm not famous, Mike's famous, but like, so I got invited to this party this CAA party. They're the Creative Artists Agency. They're like biggest agency in the world. And when we were nominated for a Spirit Award, I got to go to this party. And Mike had a good point. It's like Madame Tussauds, like, come to life. It's just all famous. You walk in, it's just famous people everywhere. I took my
I was
wife.
there.
Mike was there. And your jaw just drops. And I'm not going to say who it was, but this famous person comes up to me and was like, "Take Shelter. I love that movie. You can't tell anyone this. I have a shelter." And they took out, she took out her cell phone and showed me a picture of a massive underground condo lair. And I was like, "Where is it?" And she wouldn't tell me. It was one of the most surreal experiences of my life.
You got to tell me who that is backstage.
I'll tell you.
I got to know.
All right, I'll tell you. But anyway, sorry, that totally doesn't answer your question. It just made me think of it when you said condo. Yeah. Maybe I'm saying something about what you mentioned. Maybe. Yeah, sorry.
Well, thank you very much. I would personally like to thank Roger and Chaz and Nate for not only selecting this film, but 2 other Sony Classics films. And thank you, Michael and Jeff.
Thanks, guys.
It's been great. Thank you.